Well, good afternoon. This is the 74th year of the Albany Tulip Festival, the first one since 2019, and as you can imagine, that's drawing a lot of people here this year. Before the Empire State Plaza was built, this area was home to thousands of residents and business owners. But he says he wasn't ready at the time, just too fast, too much going on, and couldn't soak it all in. The top 4 teams will move on to the semifinals Sunday morning, with the championship game to follow that afternoon. Killings was fined $25,000 and suspended for 5 games next season. The Albany Empire will be playing in their second consecutive NAL championship game in 2 weeks right here at the MVP Arena. After going down by 5 early goals, head coach Jake Kuhn says switching to the zone defense is what made the difference.
It was a tough situation.
You heard a lot of screaming.
Ambulances, emergency vehicles couldn't get through.
And we started getting phone calls from the relatives. There's a plane that crashed in your neighborhood.
I thought that possibly the plane might even explode.
The remarkable thing, as you say, was that there was no fire.
The rest of the night was just a blur of police and firemen and sirens, and then eventually the sirens stopped.
Friday, March 3rd, 1972. It was a quiet, snowy evening in Albany with temperatures in the teens. John and Catherine Piontek were out shopping and having dinner that night.
But we heard the bartender talking about a plane crash, and they said it was on either Washington or Western Avenue.
The couple lived on Melrose Avenue. Their kids were home with a babysitter. Across the street from them, Bonnie and Vince Perry were home with their children, watching a PBS program.
When the plane hit, it shook our house, and we thought it was a plow on Colvin Avenue.
Just around the corner from them, Mohawk Airlines Flight 405 crashed into 50 Edgewood Avenue with 48 people on board. Lou Margiasso was driving down Central Avenue when he heard it over the radio.
I started walking toward the plane. As I approached, it was Mayor Corning was on the top of the hill by the plane's wings, along with another friend of mine. He was a Capitol policeman.
Albany police officer Rich Sleesman remembers how chaotic the scene was. He was 23 with only 2 years on the force.
Lifted it right off its foundation. The plane went in under it and came up, so to speak.
Rich was on scene throughout the evening and early morning. He recalls the heavy smell of jet fuel, as well as how somber the neighborhood was.
It was a makeshift morgue in one of the driveways here for the deceased, which was a tough scene.
According to the NTSB report, Flight 405 departed from LaGuardia Airport at 8:05 that evening. At 8:45, one of the pilots reported a problem with the left engine, about 8 miles from Albany County Airport. Over the next 3 minutes, they tried to feather the left propeller. Unable to fix the issue, the pilots told Albany Approach Control they were going to land short. At 8:48, the plane crashed into 50 Edgewood Avenue, 3.5 miles south of its destination.
I think that's the thing that I remember, how lucky we were that there wasn't any explosion.
In total, 14 passengers, 2 pilots, and 1 resident on the ground was killed. 31 passengers, 1 flight attendant, and 4 people inside the home survived. One of those survivors was Christopher Aldi.
I fell asleep on the plane, and I basically woke up in the emergency room.
Chris and his sister Kathy had spent the week in Florida with their mother's friend. He was 16 years old, and Kathy was 20.
I remember we sat right underneath the wings.
Chris took the window seat, and Kathy took the aisle seat at the center of the plane. At some point, Chris blacked out. He recalled briefly waking up while being rescued, and then later remembers being at the hospital.
I do remember, first words probably out of my mouth was, "Where's my sister?"
Kathy passed away. She was one of 17 killed in a crash. Chris suffered a broken jaw.
I firmly believe that my sister kept me asleep till I was safe in the ER. So I've never had any nightmares, any visions, anything of the accident.
A couple months later, Chris got a call from the family who lived at 50 Edgewood. The Rosens found an item belonging to him.
My camera that I had taken pictures with in Florida was found by the Rosens. They developed the film and they researched. And they actually brought the pictures to our house.
He cherishes the photos today, but the decades that followed the crash were difficult for Chris. It wasn't until 40 years later he found a therapist who helped him to open up. Instead of mourning Kathy's death, Chris started celebrating her life.
This is the last picture of my sister and I taken together. This is on a beach in Florida. This was taken by my mother's friend, but I now have this hanging in our house.
The events of March 3rd, 1972 would change the course of other people's lives as well. The Perrys moved to Voorheesville to get out of the flight path. Lou would unknowingly return to the site of the crash 2 years later and buy the home right next to 50 Edgewood.
I look back and feel sad for those that have lost loved ones. There's not much else you can say about it.
Chris is sharing his story for the first time since that fateful night because he believes he was meant to survive. As he puts it, to take care of his mother, his 3 sons, and more recently, a 5-week-old granddaughter.
My faith tells me that I'm where I am today because that's where God wants me to be.
Jackson Wang, Spectrum News.
This is the Eagle Theater, which is about a block and a half from where the house was.
It's a good thing Angelo Contis still has these pictures.
I spent many Saturday there watching Westerns.
They're the only thing left other than his memory to bring him back more than half a century to the Albany neighborhood he grew up in. Angelo can recall all the immigrants who settled here in the early 20th century, including his father, who came here from Turkey and later opened a shoe repair shop.
The back of the store was a small importing grocery store.
Angelo's father owned the building on Hudson Avenue. His family lived upstairs. Angelo attended nearby Phillips Schuyler High School, where he played basketball. Life, as he says, was good there.
Because of all the vibrant action going on.
Today, this is what Angelo's old neighborhood looks like. His old home sat in between what is now the Egg and the Corning Tower. On March 27, 1962, residents and business owners of this neighborhood were told their properties had been appropriated by the state via eminent domain for the future site of the Empire State Plaza.
It was disturbing in the fact that you had no idea if you were ever going to see the friends that you had made there.
Barbara Lucas Roberts grew up on Jefferson Street. That is now the location of the New York State Museum. She was 12 years old when her family was forced out of their home.
Just knowing that that area was where I lived, where we lived, and the house was demolished to prepare for that area. So it was a very strange experience.
Certainly in the 40s and 50s, the south end of Albany was a wonderful, wonderful place to live and to grow up.
Michael Mullen's parents own a cathedral shop at the corner of Madison Avenue and Eagle Street. He was 15 years old when his parents wrote a letter to then Mayor Erastus Corning, pleading for relief from this takeover.
So for them, it was very difficult. They put their life savings into the business.
In total, about 7,000 residents and business owners were forced to relocate. The state seized 98 acres of land for the project.
We realized that we could tell a different history of urban renewal, one that was a social history focused on the people affected.
David Hochfelder is one of the founders behind the blog 98 Acres in Albany. Documenting and sharing the stories of lives that were uprooted, the site analyzes several other urban renewal projects around the country and how they have impacted cities.
This project took north of $1 billion. Typical urban renewal projects were on the order of tens of millions. So the architecture here is monumental.
He says there are many lessons to take away from the construction of the Empire State Plaza, like the permanent impact tearing down something has, as well as how this action will affect future generations.
There were people, there were families, there were friendships, that were attached to all of that.
As for Barbara, she ended up working for the state at the plaza. Michael and his family moved just off of New Scotland Avenue, but their business never took off again. Angelo's father's shoe repair shop also never reopened. He does, however, occasionally go down to the plaza for July 4th and other events. For Angelo, it's an opportunity for him to reflect on the neighborhood that he once called home.
Inevitably, I'll pause and look around and say, this is where, I try to recall what it used to be like and what it is now.
Jackson Wang, Spectrum News. With just 3 games remaining in a regular season and a big matchup just 24 hours away, Ian Schwan has his Saratoga Springs Blue Streaks locked in.
Work off ball to either set a pick away or pick 4. Create some space, protect the ball. Here we go. Let's go, put down his ear, let's go.
Just a few miles down Route 50, their opponent awaits Burnt Hills Boston Lake. Longtime head coach Tom Schwan is eyeing an undefeated regular season for the Spartans.
Get those touches, eyes up, see the ball.
It's a game Tom knew was coming, but not one he looks forward to. Nothing to do with lacrosse or the matchup. He just doesn't like going up against his former assistant coach and son Ian.
I don't want to be competing against him, I want to be competing with him. It's such a cool opportunity. I mean, I'm coaching against my dad. One of my highlights for 5 years was standing on the sideline with him and Jason LaPietro every chance I could for a lacrosse game.
It's the second time the two will face off. Dad got the better of son in last year's game, which was Ian's first year at the helm at Saratoga. But on this spring evening, previous records don't matter. Spartans drew first blood. However, Blue Streaks battled back to tie at 1 after 1 quarter. Burnt Hills got things rolling in a second to grab a 5-3 advantage heading into halftime. The Schwans making sure their teams stay focused in this tight game.
Okay, we good? We good? Hey, we need the ball, Rocco. Hey, you got a minute 9. Win this time right here. Making sure we capitalize when we have the ball, understood? Let's go. Hands in. Come on, boys. Let's go, boys. Toga on 3. 1, 2, 3. Toga.
Despite a gutsy effort, Saratoga comes up short 9-5. Spartans remain unbeaten as Tom moves to 2-0 against Ian.
Maybe in a few days I'll be really proud of all them going through it, but tonight it just was hoping to get one on them.
But this is where the father-son rivalry ends. After 13 seasons at Burnt Hills, Tom will be retiring after this year. However, he doesn't plan to stay away from lacrosse. He'll likely be a volunteer assistant coach, helping out Ian at Saratoga. Father and son back on the same team.
I'm quite proud of what he's doing and how they're getting going here. And but no, I'm glad that's going to be the last time.
Jackson Wang, Spectrum News.